The atmosphere crackled with a shimmering energy as the small, sleek vessel descended through Earth's atmosphere, its silver hull reflecting the fading light of the setting sun. Alara, seated at the helm, felt a shiver of anticipation run through her slender form. Her violet eyes, large and luminous, flickered with a mix of excitement and trepidation as she adjusted the controls, guiding the craft toward a remote landing site hidden deep within a lush forest. Alara had read extensively about Earth, poring over data files and holographic projections during the long journey from her home planet, Dishara. Yet, as her vessel touched down with a gentle hum and the hatch hissed open, the reality of the world before her was far more vivid and overwhelming than anything she had imagined. She stepped out onto the soft, moss-covered ground, her boots sinking slightly into the earth. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp soil, a fragrance unlike anything she had ever encountered. Above her, the sky was a deepening shade of indigo, sprinkled with the first twinkling stars. Alara inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with the unfamiliar but oddly comforting air. It felt dense and alive, so different from the thin, crisp atmosphere of Dishara, which always carried a faint metallic tang. As she took her first tentative steps on this alien planet, her senses were bombarded with an array of sounds, sights, and smells. The rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant call of a bird, the sudden scurry of a small creature in the underbrush, all of it was new, strange, and yet somehow enchanting. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the landscape, taking in the towering trees that stretched endlessly into the sky, their branches weaving a complex tapestry of shadow and light. Alara's appearance was striking, even by the standards of her own species. Her skin, a soft shade of lavender, glowed faintly in the dim light, a characteristic of all Disharans that allowed them to communicate subtle emotional cues through changes in hue. Her hair, long and silvery, cascaded down her back like a waterfall of moonlight, catching the last rays of the sun as they filtered through the treetops. Her delicate features were a blend of sharp angles and soft curves, giving her an ethereal, almost otherworldly beauty. As she ventured deeper into the forest, she felt the weight of her mission settle upon her shoulders. Alara was not here merely as a visitor, she was an emissary, chosen by her people to learn about Earth's inhabitants and share her own culture in return. The exchange was meant to foster understanding and cooperation between their worlds, but it was also a deeply personal journey for Alara, a chance to see beyond the rigid structures of her society and explore the unknown. After walking for what felt like hours, Alara finally reached the clearing where she was to meet her human contact. The forest opened up to reveal a small, tranquil meadow bathed in the golden glow of twilight. In the center of the clearing stood a figure, tall and broad-shouldered, his back turned to her as he gazed at the sky. Harold. Even before he turned around, Alara could sense the warmth and curiosity emanating from him. It was a peculiar feeling, one that she was still getting used to. Human emotions, so vivid and raw, seemed to ripple through the air around them, almost as if they were a tangible force. On Dishara, emotions were controlled, channeled through rituals and social structures that ensured harmony and stability. But here, with Harold, everything felt so open, so unguarded. Harold turned to face her, a welcoming smile spreading across his rugged features. His blue eyes sparkled with a mixture of fascination and kindness, and his tousled brown hair caught the last light of day, creating a halo effect that made him appear almost as otherworldly to Alara as she must have seemed to him. "Welcome to Earth," Alara, Harold said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying a warmth that seemed to ease the tension in her chest. He stepped forward, extending a hand in greeting, a gesture that Alara had learned was a sign of trust among humans. Alara hesitated for a fraction of a second before placing her hand in his. His skin was warm and slightly rough, a stark contrast to the cool, smooth texture of her own. The contact sent a jolt of something unfamiliar and thrilling through her, and she found herself momentarily lost in the sensation. "It is an honor to meet you," Harold, Alara replied, her voice soft but clear. She had practiced speaking in the human tongue during her journey, but the words still felt strange on her lips, the sounds more guttural and less melodic than her native language. Yet, despite the linguistic differences, she found that there was something grounding about the act of speaking aloud, of forming words that could be understood by another. They stood there for a moment, hand in hand, both aware of the significance of this meeting, the first true connection between their species. The moment was charged with unspoken possibilities, a myriad of paths stretching out before them, each one leading to a future that was as uncertain as it was full of potential. As they began to walk together through the meadow, Harold started to explain the world around them, pointing out the different plants, animals, and landmarks that made this forest unique. Alara listened intently, her mind absorbing every detail, but it was not just the information that captivated her, it was the way Harold spoke, with such passion and familiarity, as if every blade of grass and every chirping insect were an integral part of him. The conversation flowed easily between them, each sharing bits of their own worlds, their cultures, and their histories. Harold was eager to learn about Dishara, and Alara found herself eager to share, describing the beauty of her home planet, the crystalline cities that shimmered under the twin suns, the vast fields of glowing flora that covered the landscape, and the intricate rituals that governed every aspect of Disharan life. Alara listened intently, trying to reconcile this idea with her own experiences. On Dishara, relationships were also important, but they were defined by strict social hierarchies and responsibilities that were passed down through generations. The idea that bonds could be formed and dissolved based on personal choice rather than societal expectation was both intriguing and unsettling. "Tell me more about these relationships," Alara said, her voice filled with genuine curiosity. "How do humans form them, and how do they affect your social structures?" Harold leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table as he spoke. "Well, it varies a lot depending on the culture and the individual. Some people form close-knit families that they stay connected to their entire lives. Others might have more transient relationships, forming new connections as they move through different phases of life. There's also a lot of diversity in what those relationships look like. Some are romantic, others are purely platonic, and some are built around shared goals or interests." Alara nodded slowly, trying to piece together this new understanding. "So your social structures are more flexible because they're based on the individual's choices rather than a predetermined system." "Exactly," Harold confirmed. "It allows for a lot of personal freedom, but it also means that our communities can be more dynamic. Relationships can change, and with them, the way our society functions can change too. It's not without its challenges, though. Sometimes that flexibility can lead to instability, especially when people don't have a strong support network." This was a revelation for Alara. The idea that a society could function with such fluidity, where individuals had the power to shape their own lives and relationships, was a stark contrast to the rigid structures of Dishara. On her planet, every aspect of life was predetermined: who you would bond with, when you would reproduce, even your role within the community. It was all part of a grand design, one that ensured harmony and balance, but at the cost of personal freedom. "But doesn't that put a lot of pressure on the individual?" Alara asked, her brow furrowing in concern. "If you're responsible for shaping your own life, what happens if you make a mistake or if circumstances change beyond your control?" Harold smiled, though there was a hint of something deeper in his eyes, perhaps a recognition of the struggles that came with such freedom. "It can be tough, I won't lie. But that's where our communities come in. Even though we have more personal freedom, we still rely on each other. Families, friends, even broader social networks, they're all there to support us when things get difficult, and when mistakes happen. We try to learn from them and grow. It's not perfect, but it's how we've learned to adapt." Alara pondered his words, feeling a deep respect for the resilience of humans. Their ability to navigate the complexities of life without the guiding hand of a structured system was both admirable and daunting. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something beautiful in their approach, a kind of raw, unfiltered way of living that was unencumbered by the constraints of ritual and tradition. Their conversation continued, delving into the various ways humans formed families, their approaches to raising children, and the different types of communities that existed around the world. Alara was particularly intrigued by the concept of marriage, a bond that, while similar to the life bonds on Dishara, was based on mutual choice and could be entered or dissolved based on the will of the individuals involved. "So marriage is not a permanent bond?" Alara asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Harold shook his head. "Not always. For some, it is they choose to stay with one partner for life. But for others, circumstances change, and they may decide to part ways. It's not considered a failure. Just a recognition that people and relationships evolve. What matters is the love and respect that exists while the bond lasts." Alara was silent, processing this information. The concept of an impermanent bond was alien to her, yet there was a certain logic to it. On Dishara, life bonds were sacred, unbreakable, but they were also a source of immense pressure. The idea that a bond could be based on mutual happiness, and that it could end if it no longer served both parties, was a revelation. As the morning turned into afternoon, Harold suggested they take a walk through the town's park, a sprawling green space filled with winding paths, blooming flowers, and ancient trees that provided ample shade. Alara agreed, eager to see more of this human world and to continue their conversation in the fresh air. The park was a hive of activity, children playing, couples strolling hand in hand, and individuals lost in their thoughts as they sat on benches, reading or simply enjoying the tranquility. Alara observed the way people interacted with one another, noticing the casual touches, the easy laughter, and the way emotions seemed to flow freely between them. On Dishara, physical contact was reserved for specific rituals and moments of deep connection. The casualness with which humans expressed affection, whether through a hug, a touch on the arm, or even just a warm smile, was both fascinating and disconcerting to her. It was a level of openness that she was unaccustomed to, yet she couldn't deny the warmth and intimacy it conveyed. As they walked, Harold continued to explain the subtleties of human relationships, sharing stories from his own life and those of people he knew. He spoke of friendships that had lasted decades, of romantic partners who had come and gone, and of the enduring bonds of family that persisted despite the challenges of time and distance. Alara listened, her mind a whirl of thoughts. She could see the beauty in the way humans connected, the fluidity and adaptability of their relationships. Yet she also saw the potential for pain, the heartbreak of loss, the uncertainty of change, and the loneliness that could come from the freedom to choose one's path. "Isn't it difficult," she asked, her voice tinged with concern, "to live with such uncertainty, to not know if the bonds you form will last?" Harold paused, looking out over the park with a thoughtful expression. "It can be," he admitted. "But I think that's part of what makes those bonds so special. Because they're not guaranteed, we cherish them more. We work harder to maintain them, to keep the connection alive, and when they do last, it's because both people have chosen to make it work, to grow together rather than apart." Alara considered this, a deep sense of respect growing within her for the resilience of humans. They lived with uncertainty, embraced change, and still found ways to build meaningful lives filled with love and connection. It was a kind of strength that was different from the stability of Dishara, but no less powerful. As they continued their walk, the conversation turned to the idea of love itself. On Dishara, love was a concept that was intertwined with duty, ritual, and the cycles of life. It was something that was nurtured within the bounds of a life bond, a connection that was as much about responsibility as it was about affection. But here, on Earth, love seemed to be something different, something more personal, more individualistic. It was a force that could bind people together or tear them apart, depending on how it was nurtured. Alara found herself both intrigued and unsettled by this idea. "What is love to humans?" she asked, her voice soft as they paused beneath the shade of a large oak tree. "Is it just an emotion, or is it something more?" Harold smiled, a distant look in his eyes as he considered her question. "Love is complicated," he began, his tone reflective. "It's different for everyone. For some, it's a deep, abiding connection that grows over time. For others, it's a sudden, intense feeling that can be overwhelming. It can be selfless or selfish, joyful or painful. But at its core, I think love is about connection, about seeing and being seen by another person, about sharing your life with someone in a way that makes both of you better." Alara's heart swelled at his words, the complexity of human love resonating with something deep within her. On Dishara, love was a given. It was something that came with the bond, something that was cultivated through shared experiences and mutual respect. But here, it seemed to be something that was earned, something that was fought for, something that was as much a journey as it was a destination. Do you think that kind of love could exist between us?" Alara asked hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. Harold turned to her, his expression soft and open. "I don't know," he admitted honestly, "but I'd like to find out. I think that's part of what love is, being willing to take that risk, to explore the unknown, to see where it leads." Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words, a mixture of hope and fear intertwining within her. She had come to Earth to learn, to understand, but she hadn't expected to find herself on the brink of something so personal, so potentially transformative. As they continued their walk, the conversation gradually shifted to lighter topic, stories of Harold's childhood, tales of Disharan festivals, and humorous anecdotes from their respective worlds. Yet, even as they laughed and shared these moments, the deeper questions lingered in the back of Alara's mind. It was during this quiet moment, as they sat in companionable silence, that Alara's mind turned to the most perplexing aspect of human life she had encountered in her studies: their reproductive habits. On Dishara, reproduction was a deeply sacred act, tied to the rhythms of the planet and the cycles of their suns. It occurred only during a specific season, when the entire community came together in celebration, and the bonds formed during this time were unbreakable, meant to last a lifetime. But humans were different. She had read that humans could reproduce at any time of the year, that their connections were not bound by the same cosmic rhythms that governed Disharan life. The concept was so foreign, so alien to her, that she had struggled to comprehend it fully. And now, sitting here with Harold, the curiosity that had been simmering in the back of her mind began to bubble to the surface. Gathering her courage, Alara broke the silence with a question that had been haunting her since her arrival. "Harold," she began, her voice tentative but filled with earnest curiosity, "I've learned that humans do not have a specific season for reproduction. Is this true?" Harold, who had been poking at the fire with a stick, looked up at her, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "That's right," he replied, his tone gentle, as if sensing the weight of her question. "We don't have a specific season. Humans can reproduce at any time of the year." Alara's eyes widened in disbelief. The simplicity of his answer only deepened her confusion. "But how does that work? How do your communities maintain order and balance if there are no rituals, no seasons to guide such an important aspect of life?" Harold chuckled softly, not out of condescension, but out of genuine amusement at the differences between their worlds. "It's just the way we are, Alara. Our societies are structured differently. Family units, social bonds, they're not tied to a specific time or season. We form connections based on many factors: love, companionship, mutual goals, and those connections can lead to reproduction whenever the time feels right for those involved." Alara stared into the fire, her mind racing to process this new information. On Dishara, every aspect of life was meticulously organized around cycles and rituals that had been practiced for millennia. The idea that such a crucial part of existence could be so flexible was almost unfathomable. "So your understanding of love, of family, it's not tied to reproduction in the same way it is on my planet?" Alara asked, her voice tinged with both awe and a hint of sadness. She had always believed that the Disharan way was the only way, the best way. But now, sitting here with Harold, she was beginning to see that there were other possibilities, other ways of being. Harold nodded thoughtfully, his expression serious. "Love and family are important to us, but they're not always about reproduction. Sometimes they're about companionship, partnership, and shared experiences, and sometimes they're about bringing new life into the world. But it's not dictated by the seasons or the stars. It's dictated by our choices, our desires." Alara was silent for a long moment, the crackling of the fire, the only sound between them. The implications of Harold's words were profound. If reproduction was not tied to a season, then it was tied to something else, something more fluid, more personal. And that meant that love and family on Earth were not just biological necessities, but emotional and social constructs shaped by individual will rather than cosmic design. The realization sent a ripple of unease through her. If humans could choose when and how to reproduce, did that mean their societies were less stable, less harmonious, or did it mean that they were more adaptable, more resilient? The questions swirled in her mind, each one leading to more uncertainties. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is very different from what I know. On Dishara, our reproductive season is a time of unity, a celebration that brings our entire community together. It's when we reaffirm our bonds and our place in the cosmos. To think that such an act could be separate from that, it's difficult for me to understand." Harold reached out and gently placed his hand on hers, his touch warm and reassuring. "I know it's a lot to take in, Alara, but that's why you're here, right? To learn, to see how different we are, and maybe to find some common ground. Our ways may be different, but that doesn't mean they're incompatible. It just means there's more for us to learn from each other." Alara looked at him, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. Harold's openness, his willingness to share his world with her, made her feel both closer to him and more acutely aware of the vast gulf that still lay between them. Yet, despite the differences, she found herself drawn to this human, to the warmth of his presence and the possibilities he represented. When she arrived at Harold's home, he greeted her with a gentle smile, his demeanor calm and reassuring. He had taken care to create a welcoming environment, with soft music playing in the background and the room bathed in warm, soothing light. Alara felt her anxiety ease as she stepped inside, her senses attuned to the atmosphere he had created. They sat together on the couch, close but not touching, both aware of the significance of what they were about to embark upon. Harold took a deep breath, his gaze steady as he spoke. "Before we begin, I want to make sure you're comfortable, Alara. If at any point you feel uncertain or want to stop, just say the word. This is about you and what you want to experience." Alara nodded, grateful for his consideration. "I understand, Harold. Thank you for being so patient with me." He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch warm and grounding. "We're in this together," he said softly. "Let's start with something simple, okay?" Harold began by explaining the human approach to intimacy, how it often started with small, tender gestures, holding hands, a gentle touch, a kiss. He described how these acts were expressions of affection, a way to build trust and connection between partners. Alara listened intently, her heart beating steadily as she absorbed his words. They spent time simply holding hands, allowing Alara to become accustomed to the physical connection. The touch was comforting, a reminder that this was not just an experiment but a shared experience between two beings who cared for one another. Harold's patience and understanding made it easier for Alara to relax, to let go of her apprehensions and focus on the moment. Gradually they moved closer, their conversation drifting into more personal territory, sharing memories, hopes and dreams. Alara found herself opening up to Harold in a way she hadn't anticipated, revealing parts of herself that she had always kept hidden. In return, Harold shared his own vulnerabilities, his fears and desires, creating a space of mutual trust and understanding. When Harold leaned in to kiss her, it was a gentle, unhurried gesture, a silent question that Alara answered by closing the distance between them. The kiss was soft and tender, a simple yet profound act that sent a shiver down Alara's spine. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced, both strange and beautiful, a connection that went beyond words. As they explored this new intimacy, Alara felt a sense of wonder and discovery. Each touch, each kiss, was a revelation, a glimpse into the human experience of love and connection. She found herself responding instinctively, her body and mind aligning with Harold's in a dance that was both familiar and new. Their exploration continued, each step taken with care and mutual consent. Alara marveled at the way their bodies communicated without the need for words, how the connection between them deepened with each shared moment. It was a far cry from the structured rituals of Dishara. Yet there was a beauty in its spontaneity, a freedom that allowed them to express themselves in ways that were both primal and profound. As the day turned into evening, they eventually found themselves lying side by side, their bodies entwined in a gentle embrace. The room was quiet, save for the soft sound of their breathing, and the warmth of their shared connection filled the space between them. Alara felt a deep sense of fulfillment, not just physically but emotionally. She had taken a step into the unknown, and in doing so, she had discovered something new about herself, about what it meant to be alive, to love, to connect with another being. The experience had been both enlightening and transformative, a merging of their worlds that had created something entirely new. Harold turned to her, his gaze soft and filled with affection. "How are you feeling?" he asked quietly, his hand gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. Alara smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude and something that felt like the beginnings of love. "I feel connected," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "I understand now why humans approach reproduction the way they do. It's not just about creating life, it's about sharing life, about building something together that's greater than the sum of its parts." Harold nodded, his expression reflecting the same sense of connection. "That's exactly it, Alara. It's about the journey, not just the destination." They lay there in silence for a while, simply enjoying the closeness they had forged. Alara felt a profound sense of peace, a contentment that came from knowing that she had not only learned something new but had also shared something deeply meaningful with Harold. It was a moment that would stay with her, a memory that would become part of the tapestry of her life, woven into the fabric of who she was. As the evening deepened into night, Harold and Alara eventually drifted into sleep, their bodies still entwined, their hearts beating in quiet harmony. In that peaceful darkness, Alara dreamed of Dishara, of the Great Circle, and of the stars that had always guided her people. But this time, the dream was different. The stars were not just those of her homeworld, they were the stars of Earth as well, mingling together in a vast, endless sky. In her dream, she stood in the center of the Great Circle, surrounded by her people. But there, beside her, was Harold, his hand in hers, their connection a bridge between two worlds. The twin suns of Dishara rose in the sky, their light merging with the warm glow of Earth's sun, creating a radiant tapestry of light and color. As she stood there, bathed in the light of two worlds, Alara felt a sense of unity, of belonging, that transcended the boundaries of space and culture. She knew that her journey was far from over, that there were still many questions to be answered, many experiences to be had. But in that moment, she also knew that she had taken a significant step forward, that she had found a way to merge the rituals of her past with the fluidity of the present. And as she slept, cradled in the warmth of Harold's embrace, Alara knew that she was not alone on this journey. Together, they would continue to explore the mysteries of life, love, and the infinite possibilities that lay before them, guided by the light of the stars and the connections they had forged. The following morning, as the first light of dawn crept through the window, Alara awoke with a sense of clarity and purpose. She had learned so much from her experience with Harold, not just about human reproduction, but about the deeper connections that bound all living beings together. It was a lesson that she would carry with her as she continued her journey, a reminder that the differences between their worlds were not barriers, but opportunities for growth and understanding. As she dressed and prepared to return to her vessel, Alara felt a deep sense of gratitude for Harold, for the kindness and patience he had shown her, for the way he had guided her through this new experience with respect and care. She knew that their connection had deepened, that they had forged a bond that would endure, no matter where their paths might lead. Before she left, Harold took her hand once more, his gaze filled with the same warmth and affection that had marked their time together. "Thank you, Alara," he said quietly, "for trusting me, for sharing this with me. I'll never forget it." Alara smiled, her heart full. "Neither will I, Harold. This is just the beginning. There's so much more for us to discover together." With one last, lingering look, Alara stepped out into the morning light, her heart lighter than it had been in days. As she made her way back to her vessel, she felt a sense of anticipation, of excitement for the journey ahead. She knew that there would be challenges, that there would be moments of doubt and uncertainty, but she also knew that she was not alone. She had Harold, she had the knowledge and experience she had gained, and she had the unwavering belief that their connection, their bond, was something special, something that transcended the boundaries of their worlds. As the hatch of her vessel closed behind her and the engines hummed to life, Alara looked out at the rising sun, its light a beacon of hope and possibility. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she also knew that she was ready for whatever lay ahead. With a steady hand, she guided her vessel into the sky, leaving behind the forest and the town that had become so familiar. But, as she ascended into the vastness of space, Alara knew that she was not leaving anything behind. She was carrying it all with her, the memories, the lessons, the love that she had discovered. And as she set her course for the next destination on her journey, Alara knew that she was not just exploring new worlds, she was exploring the depths of her own heart and the infinite possibilities that lay within it. The stars stretched out before her, a limitless expanse of light and shadow, and Alara smiled, ready to embrace whatever came next. For she knew, deep in her soul, that she was not alone. She was part of something greater, something beautiful. And she was just beginning to understand the true meaning of love.